The Dark Cosmos presents We Are Space Marauders. We awaken a mysterious cosmic entity. Written by Jason Inukora. Hey Creepypasta fans, it's Thomas, and I'll be your narrator for tonight. Enjoy tonight's sci-fi horror story. Also, if you want to be a part of our next story, make sure to check out our Patreon link in the description. And remember, stay cosmic.
War ravaged throughout the dark cosmos. The entire third universe shivered under the force of his steps as the stars watched in dread. He was a mighty and terrifying being, one of the first primordials, and only the mighty cosmic beings dared to war against his will. He desired to rule over the entire multiverse, and only the primordials stood a chance against him. This was a battle for gods, and not mortals. He was known by many names, but only one has stood the test of time. Mozarel, destroyer of worlds. The Battle of Mozarel raged for ages in the third universe, and losses were heavy. The primordials soon began to diminish in number, but Mozarel was an immortal. They decided to seal him and his minions with their last life force in an eternal realm of darkness. The Sphere of Hexagon, they called it. Lost for eternity in the dark cosmos.
Everyone in the bar had stopped to listen to his tale. It began with a small chuckle, but it soon grew into a roar of laughter. The loud uproar which emanated from the neon bar could be heard from a few blocks away. Captain White and his team were not left out of all the fun. They beat their chests and hit their bottles of gin against the wooden table to control their amusement. "Tell that to the kids, boy," one of the men let out. Captain White gave the boy a stern look. The boy had claimed to see something that looked like the description of the Sphere of Hexagon hovering in space during their last flight near the Plutan orbit. Even though this was his first space trip, White knew that Roran was not making his story up. He had heard the tales of Mozarel and the Sphere of Darkness, but he seldom paid much attention to it until now. "He's a good storyteller, I'll give him that," another man jeered from a corner. The boy hurried out of the bar in shame. He was sure that he had seen something. Captain White and his men had entered into planet Earth of the second universe not long ago, and Roran had seized the opportunity to search through Earth's archives. Earth's information archives were a lot more limited than they had on his planet. The inhabitants of Earth called it the Internet. It was enough to give him the information he needed anyway, and he could not be mistaken. It was the same object he had seen in the Plutan orbit. They were still engrossed in all the fun when a grumpy voice sounded from the far end of the bar. "There they are. Time to go, boys," Captain White let out. They were space marauders who journeyed from planet to planet, across the multiverse on an unending adventure. Some folks called them space pirates, and Earth, just like many other planets, had branded them wanted. Everyone in the group sprung into action as bullets danced in the air. The bar owner could be heard screaming, "My bar!" in the distance, as Captain White and his men made it out of the place, fleeing towards their space shuttle. On the pilot's seat in the Eagle space shuttle, Tim rocked his head to Sia's Guts Over Fear, humming to the music. "Ah, Earth's music. Never gets old," he mused. A voice suddenly blared through the speakers. It was Captain White.
"Tim, fire up the damn shuttle!"
he exclaimed. Tim jerked from his oblivious state and fired up the engines as the men trooped into the ship. Captain White always felt the sting of being branded a terrorist on his home planet, but it was the life he had chosen and he had no regrets. Roran was the last to speed in, and Captain White stopped him just before he ran past. "We need to talk, boy," he said calmly. Roran swallowed hard. The Eagle space shuttle wasted no time in thundering out of Earth's borders as several other spaceships trailed them from behind. They'll be damned if they caught up to the Eagle. Captain White's ship was one of the fastest in the galaxy. "Are you sure of what you saw, boy?" Captain White leaned towards Roran and whispered.
"Yes, sir. I am,"
he replied almost instantly. The men gathered round, and they looked hungry for another adventure. "Where to, Captain?" they all chorused. Captain White stared at Roran for a moment, before shifting his gaze towards the rest of his crew as a tiny smirk escaped his lips. "Set coordinates to the Plutan orbit. Let us see if there is some truth in our boys' tales." Everyone in the crew laughed aloud, but they liked the idea. Roran was the youngest and newest member of the team, but they had all seen crazy things in their many years of travel and adventures, and they knew best not to disbelieve rumors just like that. Most rumors always had some element of truth in them. "All right then, Plutan orbit it is," Tim playfully let out. They soon arrived at their destination, and Roran was right. Something hovered in the dark space, close to the Plutan orbit. There was an eerie feel around it, and ominous vibrations emanated from the massive spherical structure. "The sphere of Hexagon," Tim whispered. There was more fear than amusement in his words. The ancient object looked terrifying. "Why is this here? What made it emerge after so many years? I thought this was a famous myth told to scare space travelers." Several questions left Tim's lips. The entire crew was obviously terrified, as flashes of Roran's tales now reverberated in their thoughts. What if Mozarel was still in there? Tim thought. "Aren't we meant to be the most wanted mortals in the multiverse? Come on, let's check it out," someone said. "I think we should stay as far as possible away from this place," Roran replied almost instantly. Captain White had been quiet. He yearned for adventure, but if the tales were true, then this was definitely beyond them. The entire crew was now staring at him, waiting for his next command. "I'd say we've been through a lot together, and this wouldn't be a bad way to die," he joked. "Who knows what riches lie in there?" The entire crew soon burst into a loud roar of laughter. "Come on, Tim," Captain White lit out. "Buckle up. It's time to dine with the gods." "This is a bad idea," Roran warned. "Well, this was your idea," Captain White replied, as the Eagle space shuttle sped towards the sphere. There was a strange silence that engulfed the sphere, and a thick fear and suspense hovered in the atmosphere as they neared the object. Roran swallowed hard. His knees trembled in fear. He had read so much about this place, and he feared what terror awaited them within the sphere. "Roran, you know much more about this place than we. Lead the way." The Eagle space shuttle landed on the sphere. Roran's heart began to pound. He knew that even if the tales of Mozarel were not true, whatever lurked within the sphere was not good. The entire aura was filled with various hints of danger. Roran looked uneasily at Captain White before proceeding out of their spaceship and towards the sinister-looking object. The ancient primordials sealed off this place. The primordials were literal gods, and Roran was certain that it would take much more than a bunch of space marauders to open the doors of the sphere of Hexagon. They had no plan, no key, and no knowledge about the strange object. He was wrong, as it turned out. As he approached the sphere, the surface gave way, revealing a passage. This is not right. This door should be almost impossible to open, Roran mused. The crew proceeded into the sphere, except for Tim, who stayed back with the ship, as usual. They followed the narrow path deep into the sphere, led by Roran. Something feels weird about this place. I think we should just go back, one of the men suggested. Captain White wanted to protest, but he thought about the safety of his crew. They were right. They knew nothing about this new territory, and it would be foolish to proceed. "Where's Brick?" Roran asked. They all paused. Thick silence crept in as soon as they discovered that Brick was truly missing. "Brick!" Captain White called out, but all they got back were the echoes of his voice. "Brick! Brick! He couldn't have gone that far," one of the men suggested. Confusion slowly began to creep on their faces as they searched for Brick, and Captain White soon found him. "Brick, what are you doing?" Captain White asked. Brick ignored him. He seemed to be in some sort of trance. He held a strange object in his hands. It pulsated like a container for a large amount of energy. "He's going to activate the key. He wants to free his army." Roran sped towards Brick, but was hurled back by an invisible force. Brick muttered a few words before burying the object into a carving, shaped like the object on the floor. "Whose army?" Captain White asked. An obvious question, but somewhere in his consciousness, he still thought the reality of the tales about Mozarel being true. Mozarel might have been trapped, but his essence still had control over the atmosphere. Brick began to jerk strangely and soon dropped to the ground. "Brick," Captain White whispered. Brick was dead. The entire place began to tremble as Captain White and his men made it out of the place. Suddenly, everywhere fell quiet. Not a single sound could be heard, except their fleeting footsteps and beating hearts. They stopped, scanning through the entire place. They needed to get out, Captain White thought. He had watched Brick die in seconds. Something powerful was definitely at work, but the silence only lasted for a while. Out of nowhere, massive, otherworldly creatures sprang from all corners of the sphere. Captain White and his team pulled out their various weapons. "We're all going to die here!" one of the men in the team cried. Their weapons had little effect on the creatures as they rained several shots towards the incoming threat. It was a massacre. White could hear the dying screams of his men. They should never have walked into this dreadful place. Mozarel's minions were ruthless, tearing everything apart in a dreadful manner. The creatures were about 7 feet with distinct horns sitting atop their heads, their tails dancing in the darkness as they moved about. They were a shade of rusted brown, with metallic armor fastened to their entire body. They were apocalyptic. Captain White and his men had traveled far and wide into the entire 5 universes, and this was the most dreadful thing they had ever seen, and perhaps the last. He watched in terror as they were all torn apart. Roran and Captain White raced away from the growing chaos and sprinted into a dark path which instantly closed up, revealing a massive chamber. They turned slowly. Something else was in there. Something massive. Mozarel, destroyer of worlds, lay bound in chains. They were like cockroaches before him. Captain White soon began to stroll towards him. Roran knew that he was being controlled. Mozarel had probably found a way to free himself, but it seemed as though he needed a human to free him. He had read in one of the tales about how Kronos, the primordial from the earth, managed to seal him in an eternal time loop. Perhaps that was why he needed a human, If not, his minions would have done the job for him. Captain White strolled towards an object, similar to the one Brick had earlier used to free Mozarel's minions. It pulsated with a powerful surge of energy. "The time key of Kronos," Roran whispered. "He wants to free himself." "Captain, please! You can fight this!" Roran struggled to speak. He didn't know what Captain White was being controlled to do, but whatever it was, he didn't want to find out. "Break out from his hold!" Roran cried. "You could still save the world, Captain!" Roran's voice echoed throughout the chamber. Captain White began to fight back. He had a powerful will, and he directed his focus on Roran's voice, and for a moment, it worked. The fate of everything that lived rested on his shoulders. He seized the opportunity. Mozarel had revealed his intentions to White, and he instantly darted towards the time key of Kronos and shut it. Captain White screamed as blood streamed down from his nostrils. Suddenly, the Eagle space shuttle thundered into the room, taking out everything before its path. The space shuttle had more firepower and a lot more effect on Mozarel's army. The entire place trembled from Mozarel's wrath. A mere mortal had fought against his will and won. "We need to stop his army too," Roran let out as they climbed aboard the ship. Tim stared in shock.
"Where are the rest of the team?"
Tim asked. Roran shook his head sideways. Tim felt sober, but he couldn't afford to lose focus. There was still work to be done. He guided the spaceship towards the room where Brick had earlier activated the key, and Roran hopped from the ship and separated the pulsing object. The approaching army all dropped to the ground.
"We need to go,"
Tim said. Roran immediately returned into the space shuttle, and Tim boomed out of the sphere of Hexagon and into space. All had almost been lost. If Mozarel had risen, nothing would have been able to stop him. Tim and Roran watched as Captain White shut his eyes in death. Tim fell to the ground, weeping profusely as Roran stared at the sphere which was still hovering in this distance. He knew that this was not going to be the end. Mozarel was still going to lure some unaware travelers into his trap. They were lucky, Roran thought. They were able to stop his emergence before it completed its cycle. But it had cost the entire team. The next group might not be that lucky, and the world was not ready for a being like Mozarel. Roran prayed in his heart that the sphere of Hexagon would return to whatever darkness it emerged from. Lost forever in the dark cosmos, as it has been for ages.